Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. I'm just back from the cinema where I watched Evil Dead Rise and wanted to share my initial thoughts with other fans of the franchise, the Deadites, the Book of the Dead. This film is the one that takes us out of the cabin in the woods scenario and puts us in a sort of high-rise apartment building in the city, and I was wondering how much the change of location would change the vibe and the feel of it. The answer is not much. It still feels very much like an Evil Dead movie, which is good news. I guess my question going in is what kind of Evil Dead movie this would more closely align itself to. Would it be the nastier original and the 2013 Fede Alvarez Evil Dead movies? Or would it be the ones that include, to greater or lesser degree, sort of elements of wacky slapstick and comedy to sort of leaven the horror, like Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV series? If you've seen the trailers, I don't think it will come as too much of a surprise to you to learn that this sits, I would say, most comfortably side by side with the Fede Alvarez movie and the original Evil Dead. I happen, for the record, to love that 2013 iteration of Evil Dead. I think it showed that there was potential for that world to be explored by a different sort of directorial vision. It's a world that doesn't necessarily, and this is going to sound like blasphemy, but I'm sorry, doesn't have to have Bruce Campbell in it. Thanks especially to the 3 seasons of the TV series and 3 movies, we've got tons and tons of Ash Williams fighting Deadites, and that never gets old, and I love it. But I also love the fact with these 2 movies now that we can dip into this world of possession, demons, Deadites, body horror, excessive amounts of blood, and have other directors and creative teams play in the same sandbox and come up with their own stories. I think the Fede Alvarez one was very successful. I thought it was gleefully over the top. I think this one, Evil Dead Rise, doesn't quite meet that standard. It's very close, but not quite a cigar for me. It's out there. It's extreme, absolutely, in the way that the 2013 one was, in the way that the original movie is. And there is a certain, although there's not overt comedy in it, I think all of these iterations have, I used the word gleeful earlier, and I think that that's absolutely it. The extreme nature of the horror on display is kind of like, it is there to make horror lovers giggle in their seats, and folks who aren't particularly enamoured with horror, it will make them squirm, it will make them look away, it'll make them make all sorts of noises, and we can just giggle like maniacs beside them, enjoying the fact that they're hating it so much. The most valuable player for this movie, head and shoulders, although no one gives a bad performance, no one stands out in a negative way, but the MVP surely is Alyssa Sutherland, who plays the mother, who is the first to get possessed, and ultimately she plays the main possessed character, the main Deadite, and she swings for the fences, and boy does she get a home run in this movie. This would be the first instance where I would be very happy to see a returning Deadite. I would pay money to see her being possessed by the evil in another movie. Absolutely. She goes at it full tilt, and I think she's the best thing in the movie. Other people, as you would imagine, sort of get infected and get possessed as well. They all seem less full throttle, a little bit more standard, and I think that's where some of the sharper edges seem to have got smoothed off if you're comparing it to the 2013 Fede Alvarez version or even the original Sam Raimi movie. It's nasty without being mean spirited, so it's a fun kind of nasty, and it is a fun kind of extreme, and there are extremes there. I wish I hadn't seen quite so many of them in the trailer, or if they had to have given us something in the trailer, I wish there had been more that they held back. There is other stuff in there, but they haven't held back as much from the trailers as I would have hoped, or I would have hoped that what we see in the trailers is maybe Act 2 stuff, and there's Act 3 stuff that they build to, which is sort of bigger and better and more extreme. And I guess in a way they do, but not in a way that completely satisfied me, in the way that the denouement of the 2013 movie satisfied me. It's a slightly dissatisfied feeling that I'm finding it hard to put my finger on. And what I keep coming back to is the fact that a lot of the effects in this are CG augmented. Now, I believe that's probably also the case in the 2013 movie, although any sort of augmentation there really sort of enhanced the realism of it, if you can call the body horror in any Evil Dead movie realistic. Whereas here it's to make mouths slightly wider than they physically could be, do things to eyes that you couldn't necessarily physically do. So whilst it's subtle, and I think that CG augmentation is employed well, the eye doesn't get tricked. You know that you're seeing something that's not possible through prosthetics or real life. So it does almost take on a cartoony feel. That's perhaps it. So whereas the 2013 movie and the original are kind of full bore, they really go at the physicality of it. Evil Dead Rise is a physical horror movie. There is a lot of body horror in it, but it has, because there's that tiny sheen of CG touch up to make some things seem slightly unreal, it gives it a slight cartoony vibe, which is not necessarily out of place in an Evil Dead movie, but it's my personal taste tends towards, if not the practical CG augmentation that maintains that illusion of practicality. The change in setting really doesn't do much to change the nuts and bolts of an Evil Dead story. The plot contrivances are such that cast are trapped in the building, and for the longest part of the movie trapped on the one floor that they're on. So most of the action takes place in one apartment and the corridor outside. So to all intents and purposes, that might as well be a cabin in the woods, for all that the outside world is completely inaccessible to them, which is a little bit of a pity. I was hoping that they were going to make a real virtue of the setting and maybe lean into nods towards Lamberto Bava's Demons 2 and really go crazy with sort of the high-rise apartment block setting, but that doesn't happen, unfortunately. Maybe that's another sort of reservation of mine, that because it's sold as a completely brand new setting, and whilst the setting looks lovely, I can't fault it. There's not an awful lot new that's done with it that you haven't seen in other iterations of the Evil Dead franchise. In fact, there are some moments in sort of the car park at the bottom which made me think of Resident Evil games more than Evil Dead. And there's even a musical cue that has a chord progression that reminded me of Christopher Young's score for the first two Hellraiser movies, which kind of weirdly, it's weird how music can affect you, but I associate that type of music and that sort of little melody so closely with Hellraiser that it strangely put me in a headspace where I was thinking, oh well, this could be, I could see this in a sort of Clive Barker's Books of Blood type setting. I could easily see this as part of a Clive Barker verse, and then had to keep telling myself, well, no, this is not set in the same universe as the 2022 Hellraiser, which I could easily see it being. This is Sam Raimi's stuff. This isn't Clive Barker stuff. For such a memorable score, even after all these decades, very strange to seem to reference it in a movie that's completely separate from that world. So it is fun. It does feel like an Evil Dead movie, but it doesn't feel like a slam dunk of an Evil Dead movie, despite the absolute best efforts of Alyssa Sutherland, who is just so fantastic in this. So whilst it probably won't be the Evil Dead movie that I most eagerly return to, I'm happy to see it as part of the franchise. If I was doing a marathon through all of the movies, I would be happy to get to it and watch it again, and I will absolutely watch it again for that performance and for some of the gleefully extreme horror that's on display. I just think it's a little bit strange that the mix is slightly off, whereas the 2013 movie felt very much like a remixed Evil Dead and had its roots really firmly in Evil Dead. This feels like Evil Dead, but with just a sheen, a slight veneer of something else, a slight hesitancy to really go for the throat, that I'm struggling to put my finger on exactly. Maybe repeat viewings will dispel that reticence, because there certainly will be repeat viewings, because all in all, I think it's a hell of a fun time. I think it's a fun Evil Dead movie. It's just nowhere near the best of the Evil Deads.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.